owners of the A&S department stores, which you may know today as Macy's. The Abrahams did die in the home that you see still standing today, but unfortunately the Strausses were victims to the sinking of the Titanic. And then the next home is Casablanca, which translates to White House in Spanish. This was built in the 1800s by Louis Martins, who was a Cuban plantation owner. Today it's owned by the Amsterdam family of Alexandria Bay. And this is a 30-room home that still has all the original period furnishings, including our area's first player piano. And if any of you are interested, you are able to rent that home out for just $4,500 a night. As we continue by the property, if you take a look at the beautiful stone seawall, you're going to be able to see some lions, dragons, or gargoyles, and all their eyes and mouths are painted red. And this was to ward off evil spirits coming in from Canada. But not like ghosts or goblins like we would think of, but those of the alcohol spirits during the Prohibition. But this was actually all just a big facade, because directly behind it, the white eagle openings would hold oil lanterns. And a certain pattern of these lanterns would signify to the rum runners it was safe for them to bring the alcohol into America. And then the last home here at the head of Cherry Island is known as the Windley Lodge. This was constructed in 1962 by the Garlock brothers of Alexandria Bay for Frederick and Ellie Frazier of Solvay, New York. Well, this home was up there in place by them, so that they would have easier access to their favorite golf course located directly across the river on Wellesley Island that is known as the Thousand Islands Country Club. And so far, all these beautiful homes have been to your left. So for you folks sitting on the right-hand side of the boat, coming up we have a large rock island. Now I know it may not look like much, but as we start to make our turn here, if you look to the waterline, you are going to be able to see an opening. And he was later captured and sentenced to life in prison for the crimes of treason. But after serving only 3 short years, he was presidentially pardoned to be the first lighthouse keeper of Rock Island Lake. That's located 5 miles upriver.
అనిపిదు అసలు వాళ్ళ లోపలికి వచ్చినారు. Fine, bro.
Now on our right is Wheeler Oaks. Now that building did unfortunately burn. 6 state parks that we have here in the Thousand Islands region. It's home to the regional headquarters for all of those parks, which we'll be able to see the building coming up to our left. And it is also very well known for its marina. Well, that is because they have a seawall built up, and it prevents the wakes and the waves from the ships and other boaters using the main shipping channel from crashing your boat up against the dock. However, it is so popular that you have about a 5-year wait to get into one of their slips. And coming up on our right is Comfort Island with Comfort Lodge atop. This is owned by the Clark family of Santa Barbara, California. Now we are able to see, and that's going to be standing on top of a building that's known as a Widow's Walk or a Widow's Watch. And from up there, on a clear day, you are able to see 4 to 5 miles up and down the river. Now the next home on your right, also on Comfort Island, is Nemavin Lodge. This was owned by a superstitious stockbroker named James Oliphant. Now an interesting part about this home is the living room is completely rounded. There is no square corners. And that's because he thought the devil would catch him where his mind was most idle. He thought that would be in his living room. However, he was intentionally killed after giving some bad stock advice. Also part of mainland U.S., but this is where the home Bella Vista, which means beautiful view, once sat. This was owned by a retired dentist from Alexandria Bay, Dr. Robert C. Tagg. But when he sold that home in 2021, the new owners felt that the renovations were going to be far too costly, so they did decide to tear the home down and build the new one that you see standing there today. Now the next island to your left is Artificial Island, also known as Longview Island. Well, it gets its name because this is a man-made island that we have here in the Thousand Islands region. And the builder of that island was named Hudson P. Rose. He He constructed that home for his wife after they came to visit here during the summer months. He told her to pick out any island that she wanted. She could not find anyone, so he had this one constructed for her. And when he presented it to her, she was very picky. She said, I don't really like this one either. Then she decided she didn't like the area or him, and she left all three. And as we do make our turn back into the main shipping channel, in the distance behind us, you will be able to see the first and only American span of the Wellesley Island at 9 miles long, 4 miles wide at its largest points. And with it being so easily, now you will be able to see both those buildings a little further downriver on your left. A lot longer, and they have a more rounded mouth. And this island to your right is Stony Crest or Jewel Island. And there was that have to complete radio each other and stage somewhere else until the other one gets through. However, we are not going to be able to see this one today because it is 200 feet directly beneath our boat. And this is the Roy A. Jodrey. In 1974, during a blinding snowstorm, it struck Coleman Shoal, tearing a 75-foot gash down the side of it. And the crew and workers did try for hours to bail their ship out, but unfortunately they had to abandon their efforts to the Coast Guard station dock here to your left, where they did watch it sink. Now, no lives were lost that night. But the next day, 3 divers did go down to review the damages of the ship. And due to the swift currents of the river down there, one of the safety lines snapped and only 2 of them returned. Now they did discover that the Jodrey is unable to be brought back up to the surface, so the ship, along with its millions of dollars worth of cargo of iron ore, are unable to be brought back up to the surface. Now to your left on Wellesley Island, you'll see Hopewell Hall. And this was owned by the last surviving grandchild of George Bolt, Miss Clover Bolt Baird. This was gifted to her as a wedding present. And in 2021, it sold to the grandson of E.J. Noble for just $3.5 million. The next island to your left is Pullman Island, once owned by George Pullman, who was the inventor of the sleeper-style rail car. And in 1876, he held ocean here for President Ulysses S. Grant. And due to the wide media coverage that brought, it's what popularized the Thousand Islands region to what we know. But it was unfortunately torn down due to a tax dispute with the town. And then in the distance to your left, that large yellow building with the green roof is the Thousand Islands Country Club. They do have an 18-hole golf course and a very fancy restaurant and also a yacht club. Now they do have a $10,000 entrance fee and then a $1,000 annual fee. And then the next island to the left is Nobby Island. The home on the backside of Nobby Island is one of the oldest homes that we have here in the Thousand Islands region. But if you take a look at the newer home on the front side of the island, at those unusual stone pillars, these are made of pink Laurentian granite that was brought up from the bottom of the St. Lawrence River. And the only thing that's holding those there in place is solely the weight of the second and third floors. Now to our left is Friendly Island. Friendly Island was once owned by Paul Quackenbush of Herkimer, New York. His great-grandfather was the inventor of the double-hinge nutcracker. He also invented the extension ladder, and he wrote the patent for the Daisy Red Ryder BB gun. Now it is said that this island is so friendly if you all wave to it, even that white fence is gonna wave back. And then the island that you see with the large white anchor is St. Elmo Island. And St. Elmo was a patron saint of sailors. That anchor was put there to commemorate the men that have lost their lives and that are still serving on the river today. Now the home on top of the island is not the original home that was unfortunately lost to a fire. But if you take a look at the boathouse, that is actually the original structure, and it's a miniature replica of what the original home looked like. And then the cream-colored building with a brown roof located behind it, also on Wellesley Island, is known as the Swiss Chalet. This was constructed by George Bolt's workers so that he could house the Swiss engineers and architects that were in charge for the construction of his castle. And then the next three islands that we are going to be passing by are Florence Belle and Imperial Island. They once all housed beautiful mansions on top, but they were all unfortunately lost to fires during the 1900s. Now, fighting fires on these islands is very difficult, tools and equipment. Then they have to drive to where the fireboat's located. Hope there's a captain there that knows what he's doing that can get them there safely. So typically by the time they get to these fires on the islands, they stop the spread of it to the remainder of the island. Now, back when these homes burnt down in the 1900s, there was only 3 fireboats that was protecting the Thousand Islands region, and they were all named accordingly to how fast they were. The fastest one is known as the Last Chance, the second fastest was the No Hope, and the slowest one was called the Long Gone. Highlight of any tour here in the Thousand Islands region, that's going to be Bolt Castle located on Hart Island. Now, George Bolt purchased this island so that he could have this castle constructed for his wife Louise. That's because he wanted to show how much showing his affection this way so much. He purchased the other tiny island here to your left with that little home on it with the brown roof. This is known as Just Room Enough, and it was said it was constructed for his second true love, his mother-in-law. Now, the first structure on the Hart Island that you're going to be able to see is the Arch of Honor. Now, this was built to replicate the Arch de Triomphe in Paris, France, and this is where George would meet and greet his guests before taking them into the castle. The next structure is the Ulster Tower, also known as the Children's Playhouse, but it would be more aptly described as George's Man Cave. Inside, you'd find a 2-lane bowling alley, billiard room, movie theater, and more. All the structure that was 100% finished and ever lived in by the Bolt family. The castle itself rises 6 stories with 122 rooms, 45 fireplaces, and 365 windows. It was said that it could house 25 families or more comfortably. The upper levels of the castle is where the crews and the guests would have stayed. Second floor is where the Bolt family's living quarters would have been. Then on the bottom level, you'll find the dining room, ballroom, indoor swimming pool, and our area's first elevator. Through the trees, the white statues and the water fountain are standing in the Italian gardens. These gardens are a very popular wedding destination, typically used for 100 or more weddings each year. And then the last structure is the pump house, powerhouse, and clock tower. And inside you would have once found replica chimes like those in Westminster Abbey. And they would ring on the quarter up every hour. Now, you could hear those for miles around, but during a celebration for the opening of the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority, a skyrocket went astray, gutting that building with fire. And as we continue by it, you will also be able to see George Bolt's yacht house. Well, that was constructed so the doorways opened all the way to the roof, and that was so he did not have to lower the large wooden mast of his steamships before entering. And right now we are going to continue right on by Hart Island, but at the very end of the tour today, we will make an optional tour stop, and you'll be able to get off and tour the castle if you'd like. Well, George Bolt was a Prussian immigrant. He came over to the United States at the age of 13 on a steamship. That's where he started working in the hotel industry. He started off as a dishwasher, but after many years of hard work, he moved his way up to a very well-known hotel manager. Now, after a while, a group of investors caught wind of how good George Bolt was doing. They came to him and gave him an offer to manage 4 of their very well-known hotels. He later combined those 4 into 2 that we still know of today. Those are the Waldorf Astoria and the Bellevue Stratford. Now, in 1899, he purchased Hart Island from Congressman E.K. Hart. He changed the spelling from H-A-R-T to H-E-A-R-T, and then he blasted away portions of the island so that it would resemble a Valentine's Day heart from an aerial view. And completion was set to be in February of 1904, but just 1 month and week before it was completed, the workers received a telegram from George Bolt himself stating how our work crews has died. And she did unfortunately pass away at the age of 43 due to complications of tuberculosis. And the workers were heartbroken, but they did honor Mr. Bolt's wishes. They dropped their tools, left all supplies, leaving the island. And it did sit unattended for many years. up until 1979 when E.J. Noble, who was the inventor of the Lifesaver candies, he acquired Hart Island through part of a mass land deal. But he wanted nothing to do with the island or the castle, so he ended up selling it to the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority for just $1, and they do still own and maintain it for tourism today. And at this time, I've been talking ever since we left the dock, so we are going to be taking about a 5-minute break here. But it would be a great time to go see the girls in concession, grab yourself a snack or a beverage. Picking back up on the tour. We have been out here a little more than a half hour now. You might be falling in love with the region, thinking to yourself, I might want to purchase an island out here. So if you are, just a little bit behind us right now to our right, you are going to see a large, specially constructed on a compass, so that any day the sunlight is out, it would come through one of the windows on each side of the home. This is another man-made island that we have here in this region. So what this homeowner did was purchased a few shoals, built a sweet seawall up around them, pumped all the water out, filled it in, and then he built that home on top. Now he is from Alexandria Bay, and he did all this so that he could escape the tourism that we get here during the summer months. Luckily for him, we do bring 10 or so tour boats. Now, if any of you folks do not have an international phone, then I would suggest that you turn your phones off for the airplane mode so you can still take pictures. And during the signing of the treaty again, that ended the War of 1812, the United States and Canadian governments came together to divide up all the islands. Now, even though 2/3 of them are Canadian islands and the remaining 1/3 are American islands, they do for the most part equal out the landmass. Waiting for the resurrection. Now, his family did place a restriction on the deed for the island by paying the taxes for the next 100 years, and that was preventing anyone from building a home here. Well, that restriction has since been lifted, but the current owners elected to follow that rule still today. So it's just used as a wildlife refuge. If you look to the tops of the trees, you might be able to see some blue herons, maybe some ospreys, and if we're lucky, we'll get to see a bald eagle or two. Now, if we do get to see a bald eagle over here on the Canadian side, these are not American bald eagles, they are going to be Canadian bald eagles. Now, they are very similar, there is just one slight difference on the point of it. It is the second largest British soldiers that were stationed here during the War of 1812. Now, Limmer Island, for residents, they have an 9-hole golf course that's private for the residents, except United States citizens are able to go over there and golf for half price on Wednesdays. And they also have a helicopter pad because there is one homeowner that likes to bring his helicopter to the island. Well, that is because the majority of the St. Lawrence River is going to freeze over during our harsh winter months. So the animals will either travel across the ice, and then once they get there and springtime comes, the ice melts away. They built their new home and they're stuck there. Or you might see a white-tailed deer swimming across the river from island to island. And they're able to do this because they have hollow hair follicles that allows them to float on the surface as they go. Robert Hewitt, who was the owner of Hewitt Heavy Equipment, he supplied the majority of the equipment that was used for the St. Lawrence Power. Now, he is also very well known because he did help out with the Alaskan pipeline, and while he was there, he became very good friends with some of the Ketchikan natives of Alaska. So if you take a look on either side of the flagpole, you will be able to see a couple of Ontario. And if you take a look to your right at that newer looking building, this is Huck Marine. This was constructed in 2021. Now inside that building, there is a kitchen facility, bathrooms, showers, and a gym. And that's for the convenience of all those boaters that you see over there. They actually live on their boats here during the summertime. Fun fact about Rockport, they actually have more docking area than car parking spot area that want to check in and go on land or fish over here in Canada. Now they also have their own diving school, so if you take a look to your left, you're going to be able to see some orange and white buoys. This is the sunken ferry that used to travel in between Alexandria Bay and Rockport. This is known as passenger ferry, was no longer needed, so they did intentionally sink it there so that the students would have something to dock for when they came for class. Notice one difference. Well, that is going to be me. If you went on one of their tours, you would not get a handsome live tour guide like you have today. It would simply be an audio recording. And then the church on top of the hill is the St. Brendan's Roman Catholic Church. It is said to be the oldest church in eastern Ontario. Now, it's also said that back during the Prohibition years, they would make alcohol down in the basement to smuggle over to America. And if the authorities ever got suspicious of what they were doing, they would just tell them that they were making holy water. Deeper part of the river, known as the Canadian Palisades, it's going to range from 150 to 250 feet deep through this section. Now, this section of the river is pretty much known as the Canadian Millionaires Road. However, as we travel through this section of the river, you are going to notice a lot newer, more modern homes. Because of that,
కంప్లీట్గా అందులోపల డాడీకి దింపు.
suspension span. And right now we are in between two Canadian parks. So to your left on Georgina Island is Georgina National Park, only accessible by boat. And then over to our right is Ivy Lee Provincial Park, and this is accessible by car and boat.